How's it going, everybody? On Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, there is a remote Discord tournament. Every week, we'll be going over the winning deck list and strategies, so don't forget to tune in every week for our next tournament result.
Sign-up details are in the tournament section of the unofficial Godzilla card game Discord server. There's a ton of great people up there for casual gameplay, deck discussion, deck lists. We'll post a link in the description down below, so check it out.
What's going on, everybody? We're here with Ryzen, the other top table contender for the last week's unofficial Godzilla Discord tournament. Ryzen, you want to say hey?
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
We're going to go over his red Godzilla deck profile. What would you call the deck? Like rage-based, destruction-based?
One, not an original idea of mine. I stole this, actually. I saw a Japanese player post this on X, and while I couldn't recreate the deck, you know, one for one of every card that they were including in theirs, I tried to do as close as I could to what their, in essence, their strategy was. So this is actually more of a counter-based red deck, which might sound kind of weird or sound kind of funny because, you know, red usually wants to win by invasion and like destroying a lot of stuff, but actually works extremely well as a counter deck, especially when you kind of move slow, let the opponent get ahead of you, and that they're going to allow you to play the counter cards that you're really looking to use, which are pretty much going to be the Gam and the Chibi Goji, which is also going to help thin your deck. And then if they're not wanting to step forward, you've got the Godzilla landings to help, you know, push them along, to get them to where you want, to where
get on down there now.
Drop what you want. Yeah. So you can get them into whichever zone you really want to, and then if they have anything really pesky, I basically just teched in certain strategy cards to deal with basically things that are just kind of common to see within our meta, really. For a while there, some folks were running Biollante, which is why I actually teched in the Godzilla attacks, so that way I could just kind of like zoom to zone 6 instead of just constantly getting countered without any counterplay. You basically would just drop Godzilla attacks to get to zone 6, pitch like a Gam, and then to get to zone 8, and then you can drop kings, some of these kings here, and with all the rage you play in the deck as well, you'd be able to rage up some and definitely counter those Biollantes a couple times to get them on the move, so that way that they're not just sitting there and just kind of like stun locking you, essentially.
Okay.
But yeah, I run a few things different from the Japanese deck I saw. The Japanese deck was running something like 3 Despairs, which I only have 1, unfortunately. But then also, the Despair in Japanese, it was translated differently into English from what I understand.
Heard that.
So the English ones actually kind of nerfed, because Despair works in Japanese, like if you're in zone 8, essentially you can destroy zone 8 or all the way down to zone 1. Whereas in English, if you're in zone 8, you can only destroy zone 7 all the way down to zone 1. So very interesting that essentially like the Japanese card's kind of like OP.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
In order to essentially like get around not being able to play all the Despairs, that's why I threw in like the Final Showdown. Like the Japanese deck wasn't running that, so I threw that in because at that point it's essentially doing the same thing as a Despair would be doing if you're trying to kill something up in one of those higher level zones as well. The unfortunate downside, does also blow up your board, but I mean, you kind of gotta do what you gotta do if you're forced into a situation like that. The Discord, you know, there's a couple combo decks that were floating around, and they're pretty nasty, where folks would basically use Godzilla attacks to get to zone 6, drop the level 2 Shin Goji, and discard a strategy to bump them into zone 7. blow something up and then two-step to victory, and it was like a pretty consistent strategy. So to counter that, and I teched in the space beam. Only one of it, because it is taking up one of those two-step slots, unfortunately. But I think it was a really good tech. And then I just have Ginza Annihilated strategies in here as another general all-purpose, removal, basically.
Yeah. So I got a question for you. How do you feel about Space Beam over Operation Watatsumi?
Ooh, great question. So Watatsumi, I did not like as much just because this deck specifically, you don't want to be in front of your opponent, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
It's a level 7 card, right?
Yeah, it is a 7.
Yeah, so being in zone 7's bad for this deck. Like, you don't want to be there unless you're intentionally trying to basically get to zone 8 just to drop the kings. Otherwise, you do not want to be moving. Like, if the other opponent is moving, you want to just let them move. And like, if they're thinking like, I'm gonna get to zone 7 and then I'm just gonna play some destruction and two-step to win, that's when you bump them forward with Godzilla landing and then play the kings or whatever. But yeah, essentially you don't want to be in front of your opponent, so that's kind of why I didn't choose to play the Operation Watatsumi and instead play the Space Beam, because I want to be sitting in the back row as much as possible.
Yeah, heard.
So there's plenty of removal with the deck, and that's also why I used the level 3 Godzilla. He also will help you destroy and blow things up off the board. The level 2 Godzilla is going to help you thin your deck, and then the level 4, everybody knows what he's there for. He's, again, there for removal, blowing up.
He is a problem.
Their side of the board on your turn, and then on the opponent's turn as well, to really make it a struggle for them to close the game out.
So, what are your ratios for monster strategies and battles cards?
As of right now, I recall correctly, I believe that I'm running. I'm only running like the 4/4 line of the Gam and the King, and then the 3 Chibis. Those are really the only battle cards that I'm running. So that would be 11. Mm-hmm. And then I'm running the 4/4 Godzilla landings, 2 Ginzas, a Space Beam Showdown, Despair, and a Godzilla attacks. So you're looking at another 10. So if we're looking at that, basically the last 29 cards are monster cards. So it's rage generation for the rest of them.
Oh yeah. And so how do you feel as though the deck did overall? You get second place, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep, I lost to Ian at the top table. He was running the I just wasn't able to fully get around his Biollante deck, and by the time I was able to get around it, he had a handful of counters, and unfortunately I wasn't able to find the Space Beam to like play that to get him to get rid of his hand to where he could counter me.
Yeah.
So yeah, he just had the upper hand that game. But as far as playing against everybody else, had some really good matches. But ultimately, I don't think anybody. I think Ian definitely got me into my level 4 Goji, and I think I got into my level 4 Goji one other game, but otherwise I was able to close the games out as a level 3, like I'm not even making it to my level 4. And then the one game where that wasn't Ian, where I got into my level 4, basically once the level 4 came out and I was able to just rage and blow stuff up and step once and rage again and then blow some more stuff up, they pretty much lost all of their counter power through those 2 actions. So very difficult to recover from. Just a really strong red card in general.
Yeah, I agree. So do you feel as though now knowing, like going forward with all the Biollante decks running around, that you would implement any lower than level 5 battle cards into the deck? Because that was my issue, is I didn't have any battle cards I could play to stop him with him stuck in zone 5 like that. Everything I ran into the issue with the Gams and the King of the Monsters. I just couldn't get him to the board.
Yeah, the strategy that I've thought about, and I was like, how would I get around this? and it kind of just hit me in the face. It's pretty actually clever, pretty obvious what you need to do, because you want to get the Biollante moving essentially, and the way to do that, Condor actually, because Condor is just a straight 10,000 when you play it, right? So you're gonna make sure that they just don't have any rage out, and then you just drop Condor. You're gonna counter them the first time for sure. That'll put them into their level 2. And if you're, they're probably going to rage to blow up that Condor, but if you run 2 of them, you can play down the next one, and then you just need a little bit more, and to make sure that they don't have any rage when you're trying to do this in order to push them into their level 3. I had thought about playing some other things like Baron, to help, do a little bit of deck thinning and to have a little bit extra counter power. But honestly, if I was just going to change this deck from how it is right now, as is, I would just drop 1 Chibi Godzilla for a Condor, do the Condor thing to push him into level 2, continue trying to get through my deck by discarding monster cards until I had exactly, or until I was able to basically do some type of a combo that would either be like Godzilla attacks to get me to 6, Gam to get me to 8, play 2 kings, and rage some, or something to that effect. I would just be playing for a hand like that. That would get it to where I'm able to push them into their 3rd form where they have to start moving, and then that's where this deck really shines, because once they start moving, it's just like, okay, now I can play Gams, now I can also Godzilla landing them forward, play more kings, rage, and just continue to counter them. And also, usually once you get a Biollante moving, they don't like that, because usually they're surrounding themselves with other cards that are like, benefit from being around the Biollante, or like the 80, not the 80,
the level 7 Godzilla from the Space Godzilla movie poster.
Yeah, so now they're going to be moving forward, so they step on that, and then you could like Godzilla landing it into zone 7, play a bunch of Gams, counter it that way, and then it's going to get pushed back to where the other one is usually sitting, which is in zone 4. That's probably the only thing I would tech and change. Other than that, had some really good games. Sometimes the opponents would kind of misplay against the deck just because they see a red deck, right? And they're thinking, I'm gonna just rush to zone 7 or 8 and just rage up and hope that they can't stop me, and then I just kind of 2-step to win or something like that. And so I think I caught a couple off guard where I was just 1-stepping, I was just not moving at all, just ditching for rage and just biding my time. And then they were just moving ahead in the board and maybe doing a 2-step here, a 1-step there, but they kind of just walk into the trap. Once they get into zone 7 and 8, I start pushing them up with landings and dropping Gams and the kings.
Yeah, I agree. I ran something kind of similar 2 weeks ago. Well, hell yeah, man! I love the deck. I love what you've done. It's very straight and to the point. I love your ratios for everything. Is there any shout outs you want to do? Anybody you want to say hey to?
I don't have anybody in a local scene, so I'll just shout out the folks on the Discord that keep showing up to the tournaments and playing in those. If you're not on the Godzilla card game Discord, search it out, get into it. They do a tournament every Sunday at 6 p.m. Central Time. Come out and play with us. It's a good group of folks. We'll help you learn if you're looking to learn. And it's a continuously growing community as more folks, find and discover the game and get into the game. So check that out. If you want to watch some gameplay, watch some of the tournaments, you can check me out at twitch.tv/RyzenKnight or on Kick at kick.com/RyzenKnight or YouTube, the Ryzen Knight as well. So I'm on all of those, and there's a lot of the tournaments that I've recorded or streamed in the past. So there's a lot of content to go through if you're looking to see what the game is all about, see how the community is, and find some folks to play with.
Absolutely, I agree. Ryzen, thank you for your time very much. I always appreciate it, and I hope I'll see you next Sunday, man.
Yep, I'll be there. See you then.
How's it going, everybody? We are back again with Ian, the reigning champion of the unofficial Godzilla Discord tournament every week. My man is kicking butt.
Not literally every week.
not every
Just most of the weeks.
Most of them. If you want to do any shout outs before we get started with the deck profile?
As always, shout out to all my sparring buddies at my local game store and the local game store itself. So SK Games and my friends Taft and Rick and Doug, and also my friends on the Godzilla card game unofficial Discord server, which if you're not on, you should absolutely get on. So guys like Paul, guys like Tuscan, there's a bunch of really cool people in the Godzilla community that are all getting together and doing some really fun stuff. So shout out to everybody who's out there contributing to that.
Awesome. All right. Well, if you want to go ahead and get started, let's see what you got this week.
So this deck that I'm bringing you today is very, very different than the deck from last week. For starters, it's blue. For seconds, it doesn't move. We are playing Biollante, and specifically the rank 1 Biollante Rose form, which has a very unique text of if it's in your monster deck at the start of the game, it's in zone 5 and it cannot advance, nor can it invade. This is the reason why the deck works, because we are playing a control deck today that is focused around denying resources to the opponent along more or less every axis possible. And the first, most basic resource that we can deny is we can deny them the ability to play battle cards that are above rank 5. And when they can only play battle cards that are rank 5 and below, a lot of decks, they just kind of stop working very, very quickly. They very quickly lose the ability to execute significant amounts of counter power. They often get cards stuck in their hands, so they're not cycling through their deck reliably, so we're also denying them. Really, in two ways, we're denying them drawing cards because they're not cycling their hand, and we're also going to be trying to stay at this level 1 for as long as possible, so they're not drawing more cards. Biollante has 6,000 threat, which is a very nice high starting number. It's the highest of any of the rank 1s in terms of base printed stats. And we will be keeping that number comfortably above the thresholds that any amount of rank 5 battle cards can really deal with through some of the deck building decisions that we have later on in this process. We go into our level 2 Biollante Rose form, because say you do actually manage to counter it, guess what? It still doesn't move. It cannot advance or invade, and on enter it plays a tentacle token. These tentacle tokens are actually normally bad, funnily enough, because they'll often play in, you have to play one into a zone, so oftentimes it'll be in a zone that you don't actually want it to be in. Yeah. But nonetheless, you can sequence it properly sometimes where you get a free 3,000 counter power. Maybe that's desirable, maybe it's not. But it is also another non-moving plant, and this time with 11,000 threat. And if we weren't sure if we could keep the 6,000 thing alive with enough rage and so on, we could definitely keep the 11,000 thing alive. Very, very commonly, this deck does not go above level 2. In fact, it often doesn't go above level 1 if things are going well. But level 2 is normally about as far as people can normally get you. However, you do have a level 3 and level 4 monster. The level 3 is when the plant beast form comes into the picture, and it has this nifty little ability where if the opponent has a strategy card in play and you're in at least zone 6, it just can't be countered unless they have 40k over 40k counter power, and it just moves as though it were countered. So it kind of does a similar effect to the rank 4 Godzilla monster in, I want to say, set 1 that can only be countered by, greater than 50,000 counter power. Very similar thing, except it's a rank 3 card and it's a threshold of 40k. It is dependent on the opponent playing a strategy card, but let's be real, most of the time they're not able to play a bunch of battle cards. So anyway,
right?
Or they're wanting to do something, or they're wanting to do something on their turn to interact with us in some capacity. These punishment for them doing so is pretty high. But generally speaking, if you're going to rank 3, it's because something has gone wrong, or you're in an incredibly specific matchup. In those matchups, we usually find ourselves not spending a ton of time in this form. We're going to try to quickly close out the game. But funnily enough, often by evasion in this countering deck, if things have gone this awry. And then finally, the rank 4 is a massive chonker of a monster at 55,000 threat. But at the beginning of the opponent's counter phase, it doubles the counter power of the battle cards in the same column as it. Now, that sounds bad, but like, generally speaking, you play that one thing, you're starting at 55. The other rank 4 that's available in this slot is very low. So on a net basis, it's actually starting out quite a bit higher, even if there is something big in the other column. But generally speaking, the breaking point's about above 10K. So if they have a GAM exactly in the other column, then this thing is breaking even. If they have something that's better than GAM, then it starts to become a little bit uneven, not in your favor. If they have anything that's worse than GAM, it's still in your favor. Also, it's funny to be able to just go Rage 3 and be at 70 out of nowhere.
Yeah, is that the highest monster card in the game so far?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay, cool.
At least in terms of base printed stats. So, all throughout the way, you can see we're trying to be very resilient to being countered, be very resilient to letting the opponent have any sort of plays or interaction. And in order to facilitate that, we need to stay on these two forms as long as possible, which means that we got to play a bunch of monster cards, right? We need to increase our rage, which makes it harder for us to get countered. And that is more reliable than it is in some other decks because we're not forced to continue advancing up the field. So we can just continue locking them into rank 5s and below while raging up above a threshold that the rank 5s are not mathematically able to hit. That's the general idea. Yeah, and then these really 3 and 4s, these really just interact with a few specific situational cards in the deck that if you do happen to end up at rank 3 or 4, you can still win the game. We'll talk about those when we get there. For the moment, though, let's address the matter of the strategy cards, the cards that are going to allow us to... sorry, not the strategy cards. Let's address the monster cards, because these are what enable us to keep our threat high enough that we don't ever worry a whole lot about getting countered. First off, you want to max out on your Biollante names that aren't Invade 2s. So you want to max out on your Rose forms of level 1 and level 2. You want to max out on the rank 3, both forms, and you want to max out on the Plant Beast form rank 4. Although in this case, I was actually missing a few of those. Funnily enough, I just substituted in any other blue monster cards, which, spoiler alert, a lot of the additional slots in this deck are just going to be, and some blue monster cards.
Yep, I did something similar in my Red Rage.
But the idea is that you want to be, generally speaking, stacking the level 1s if you have the ability to do so, because that removes them from the deck permanently. They're not ever going to go to the graveyard. They're never going to get reshuffled back in. So it's reducing the amount of cards that you have to cycle through whenever you reshuffle your deck to end up again. Because this deck is slow. It's a control deck. It's slow. It's grindy. It is usually going to draw its entire deck at least once. It may even draw its entire deck multiple times. The rank 2s, sometimes you play them because they make a tentacle token when they enter. Sometimes you don't play them because maybe you have something in that zone that you want to keep. Maybe you just discard it for rage. Generally speaking, though, as long as you're keeping the amount of monsters in your graveyard at 8 or above, you're safe to play most of these monster cards when you have the ability to. And some of them are even useful. This one is useful. The rank 3 we are not playing in the monster deck. If we have a strategy card in play, we play it. It blows up any rank 5 or lower battle cards in a zone of our choice. Not awesome. Sometimes comes up. Mostly in my experience comes up to kill Shin Godzilla frozen forms.
Yep.
But I digress. Theoretically, comes up. We play more copies of the rank 3 that has that anti-strategy condition on it for a couple of reasons. One, it has slightly higher base threat than this thing, so after we do this effect, if we don't need it again, it's better to swap it back out. And also we might, just generally speaking, we want to max out on the Biollante names for the whole make the deck smaller on the reshuffle thing that I was talking about earlier. And indeed, that's the only purpose that the rank 4 serves, because it's not like we have any other rank 4s in the deck. So you play 16 Biollante names, or as close to that number as you can manage. And then, since you run out of Biollante cards at that point, you play 12 other blue monster cards. You can kind of pick and choose your favorites here. I picked ones that have art from the Biollante movies.
Awesome.
Right? So we've got this Godzilla 1989, this Godzilla 1989, and the Destoroyah movie, and also the Mechagodzilla movie. And the reason I picked those specific ones is guess what the battle cards are?
It's very on theme.
So, yeah, I thought it would be fun. I'm like, well, what else am I going to do with these slots, right? Altogether, you got 28 monster cards. Maybe some versions of the deck you do 30. I think 28 was fine. And then we'll move right along to the battles. The big idea of this deck is exploiting the fact that Biollante doesn't move as much as possible, right? We've talked about that. Well, this is another way that we exploit that effect. Since Biollante doesn't move, we can basically stall out until we draw exactly the right cards and build like our perfect end board, more or less. Which in this deck looks a little something like this. All right, you've got the Biollante in Area 5. You've got Godzilla 1994s in Areas 4 and 6. You've got Gams in Areas 1, 2, 3, and 7. And you got a big old Destoroyah in Area 8. That's what the deck is trying to do. And because you will draw your entire deck, potentially multiple times, you'll basically always find all of these cards. But let's talk about what these cards do. Gam, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, is a 7-drop that cannot be played unless you have at least 8 monster cards in your graveyard. Well, if you play 28 of them, usually you can play the Gam pretty easily. And it has an additional effect where if you ever invade with, while you have it, you can put a monster from your discard pile underneath it in order to set your opponent's rage. I think I have done this maybe one time in playing the deck just under 100 times at this point.
Really?
There's maybe once that I actually needed to do this because I was simultaneously still going for a countering victory, and that mattered that I knocked my opponent back. I was also in the point where I was at rank 3 and therefore able to invade. Those two states don't actually arise very often. Most of the time it's here to be just 10,000 counter power on one card in one zone. And that's what it does very efficiently, more efficiently than just about any other 7-drop in the game, provided that you're able to get the monster requirement, which this deck can. Then we actually play in this version of the deck 4 copies of Godzilla 1994, even though the inboard only has 2. Sometimes they get blown up by the opponent. More commonly, they get blown up by our level 2 monster in the monster deck. And so when that happens, we have to replace them. And also we want to draw this card, fairly consistently, because it has this nasty ability where as long as it's adjacent to our monster card, which since we don't move, it is always, we get to knock our opponent's monster card back 1 zone as long as it has 40,000 or less threat. So any level 1 in the game, any level 2 in the game, many levels 3 and 4 as well in a lot of decks, they're getting knocked back 1 zone at the end phase. Mind you, this is in addition to any amount of zones they might have gotten knocked back during the counter phase. So a common little number, you'll have 2 of these in play. Your opponent gets countered from area 8 to area 3, or maybe area 7 to area 4, and then suddenly you're back in zone 2, you're back in zone 1. Restart the game. And especially if the deck is intending on winning through invasion, it can be pretty brutal to get sent back to area 1. It's a 4 copies. Then, last few cards, we're finally playing Evolution in something. And well, I say people have been playing it. I'm finally playing Evolution in something. I'm playing a very small package of Destoroyah cards for a few different reasons. I'm playing 3 of the level 4, 1 of the level 6, 1 of the level 8. This is a piece of the end board. We do eventually want to have this 8-drop Destoroyah in area 8, but funnily enough, it gets played more so for its synergies with other cards than for the actual Destoroyah text of the level 8 itself. But we can play this 4-drop most of the time. That immediately activates our strategy card, Godzilla versus Destoroyah, which we'll talk about here in a second. It also lets us start bridging into the level 6 and the level 8 when it evolves. This level 6 lets us get away with running only 28 monster cards and still trying to play 4 Gams. Oftentimes, this will pop on the second turn, and that'll allow us to draw 2, discard 2. That gets us the 8th monster card in the graveyard very consistently, actually. And then if it doesn't get dealt with, it evolves into the 8. For the most part, though, you're running this out, you're using it in combination with a strategy card to get some quick counter, and eventually you manage to stick one of these on the board and you evolve it up. Sometimes you don't even evolve it up immediately if you don't have a Godzilla versus Destoroyah strategy card in the graveyard that you want to reuse with the Destoroyah Perfect Forms effect. But timing-wise, it's kind of up to you in the matchup to determine what you want to do. So you got, once again, that's the 4 GAM, the 4 Godzilla 1994, and then the 5 Destoroyah cards, the 3/1/1 Evo line. That's your battles for 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We do not play any bad battle cards is the idea. We don't want to play anything that isn't going to more or less immediately counter the opponent, or even if we can't get a counter, be able to block Zone 8 very, very conclusively.
Yeah.
Because if you put anything that's not a 7-drop or higher into Zone 8, it's getting removed. Like, yes, realistically. Some decks, blue ragey decks, they play maybe Burning Godzilla's Rampage. They can remove anything out of Area 8. Those decks, you just really have to counter them on that turn. But everybody else, they have a lot of trouble with dealing with 7 and 8 drops in Area 8. And so that is how you can stall often for a turn or two, even if you don't get the counter immediately. But often, and in combination with the 94s. But then oftentimes you're just going to be getting the counter anyway. And usually getting into a loop where your opponent never actually gets to make forward progress on the board ever again. Finally, we have the strategy cards. Starting with my favorite, 4 copies of Gravity Beam.
Good old
Card's
Gravity
awesome.
Beam. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
So think about it. We're staying at level 1. We're raging out, 4 to 6 every turn. They're playing rank 5s. They're not countering us. And so that means the opponent is drawing only 1 card per turn. When they're drawing only 1 card per turn and you Gravity Beam them, that means that they're starting their turn with 4 cards. 4 cards is not a lot of cards. It's actually very, very difficult to mount an effective response when you only have 4 cards. For example, being able to rage above the threshold that could be knocked back by the Godzilla 1994. That's hard to do if you only have 4 cards. You only get maximum 20k rage most of the time, right? Unless you're playing rage boosting strategies. But how are you playing strategies if you're getting knocked back the whole time on the board, right? It's a little bit of a catch-22 there. But regardless, ideally, because there's 4 of these, I have access to this card, from the beginning of the game. Maybe turn 1, turn 2, I have Gravity Beam. You don't always cast it immediately. Sometimes you do. But because of the fact that this guy starts in Area 5, you can cast it immediately if you need to, and you can never not cast it. Usually you wait until a pivotal turn, like when the opponent is, on their next turn is going to end in Zone 7. Then you play this card before that happens. That way they end in Zone 7 with a maximum of 4 rage. You play a couple GAMs or 94s or something like that. You counter them. You start the knockback loop. You lock them out of the game. Gravity Beam just cleans up so much. Also, sometimes it'll be very funny. People will try to stockpile cards in hand so they can hit a rage threshold that doesn't get knocked back by this for 1 turn to make a key advancement. And you Gravity Beam them and they discard 8 cards and it's crazy.
Oh, that's brutal.
So that interaction is pretty funny too. Other strategy cards we play, not very many actually. The 2 copies of Godzilla versus Destoroyah. This card, as long as we have a Destoroyah, gives us plus 10k counter power. So the theoretical top end of this deck with counter power is 82,000 because you have 4 GAMs, a Destoroyah Perfect Form, 2 Godzilla 94s, and 2 Godzilla versus Destoroyahs, one of which can be in the graveyard, right? So you don't actually have to draw, both of them at the same time. You can replay one of them using the Destoroyah's effect. And remember how I said you only have 4 cards? So there's essentially no rank 4s in the game to where they can survive 82,000 counter power with only 4 cards. So you build progressively closer towards that ideal inboard state, and your opponent is never really able to productively remove any of your stuff because it's all 7s and higher, and you just draw through your whole deck a little bit at a time, raging out 4 to 6 cards usually, and that creates the inevitable condition where you draw everything that you need, you have your inboard ready to go, your opponent eventually, unlike you, they have to move forward, they have to go to 7. So then you drop that stuff and it never gets removed and you just counter them probably 4 turns in a row after that a lot of the time. Sometimes there's a bit more of a fight than that, but usually when you get people in the lock, it's very difficult to get out of it. This is a deck that you really want to kill early. You want to kill this deck on turn 3, if possible, because The longer the game goes after that, the worse it gets for you. And then finally, last 3 cards are one-ofs of a few different situational strategies. Scale attack, if we're playing against a Ragey deck, or some other types of, like I've seen Space Godzilla play, bite attack or something like that. This just kind of responds to that pretty well. Space Godzilla happens to also just be one of the deck's worst matchups. So another card that interacts favorably with that sort of thing is nice. Apart from that, though, you also see some interesting interactions with old school Red Rage. Whenever they're just trying to go above the top, scale attack is very punishing. On the flip side of that, we have Oxygen Destroyer, right? So, okay, if it's a Ragey deck, scale attack screws them over. If it's a not Ragey deck, Oxygen Destroyer screws them over. We play one of each because we can pretty much always find it because we're drawing through our entire deck. We're making the game go a long time. And this allows us to get an extra knockback as though we're countered on a key turn. Or if we maybe can't get, like say our opponent doesn't have, maybe they're at rank 4 and they don't have enough monster cards to be able to be, or they do have enough monster cards to get knocked back by the 94, or they don't, right? These are sorts of decisions that they have to make based on how they're going to play out their hand. Maybe they choose to rage out a couple just to not get knocked back by the 94 because maybe at rank 4, rank 3, that's a thing that you can do. But it still leaves you in Oxygen Destroyer range. So it's just, it's the deck that's full of answers. Whatever you're trying to do, there's a good chance that between Oxygen Destroyer, Scale Attack, Gravity Beam, and Destoroyah, I can probably interact with it in a way that's not favorable for you. And then finally, last card of the deck that says, what happens if you get countered? You just win with Invasion, because Godzilla 2000 Millennium, as long as you have 10 or more monsters in your discard, which is pretty much turn 2, turn 3 onward, you can destroy your opponent's battle card in Zone 8. So it does a BGR impression, super chill, but it does a BGR impression while still also doing something in the early game because it can destroy a rank 5 or lower battle. So it can kill, a frozen form or something like that. Or again, sometimes, funnily enough, I literally just use this to kill a Space Godzilla crystal because keeping them below 3 crystals at certain points in time is important. But yeah, so that's the the one of the tech strategy cards that you find, you use them. The basic loop of the deck. Rage out a bunch, find your key battle cards, get them positioned appropriately, continue to gravity beam your opponent whenever they're about to do something important or on a turn that is likely to matter. So like a turn before they go into 7, for example, or before they get access to a key strategy card, maybe that that their deck plays. Or if they're just stockpiling cards, you don't want to let them do that, so you rip the hand away. And between all of this, you end up with a deck that's very consistent. It's very controlling. It doesn't really permit the opponent to play very much after, turn 3, turn 4. Really, once you get countered one time and they get knocked back to area 1, it's very difficult to recover from that most of the time.
Yeah, I noticed. You definitely hosed me with the deck last night.
It's becoming a recurring bit in these segments.
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with it. I'm still learning, and that's why we make these videos, so other people get to learn too about how Ian is the undisputed champion.
Yeah, I hope that this was an interesting deck. It probably doesn't make you a lot of friends at the local game store. It probably does win you a lot of matches, though.
Yes, it definitely does. So what would you say is the deck's best matchup, and what would you say is the deck's worst matchup?
Best matchup, Shin Godzilla. The Shin Godzilla aggro combo kind of deck, which is, I think, the deck that I showcased last week here on this channel. But this deck is very much designed to prey upon that deck because if they are, normally that deck wants to get countered to zone or to rank 2 because it has the ability to combo you out as soon as it's at rank 2. The problem is that requires it to be either in zone 4 or above at the start of the turn, or to have access to Cabinet Helicopter, which allows it to play a 6-drop battle card and then teleport up to area 6. Now, you might have noticed a problem with what I just said. 6-drop battle card.
It's a 6-drop.
So you create a situation where they get countered from 7 to 4, they get knocked back 2 zones, they can't teleport back, so they're at level 2, but they can't combo you because you're only in zone 5, they can't play the helicopter. So maybe they invade 2, all right, whatever. Maybe they don't invade 2. Either way, you counter again, you knock back 2 zones again, they just never really get the opportunity to execute the combo before you've already got them at rank 4, because they're barely keeping pace with the amount of knockback that you can do. And if at any point in that sequence they fail to draw an invade 2, they're making negative progress, right?
Yeah.
So the deck just gets bodied basically by this archetype by design. And as far as worst matchups, probably Blue Rage aggro, because they can actually get a high enough number that maybe I don't get the counter on turn 3. Maybe I have only drawn 1 copy of Gam, or maybe only 1 copy of my knockback guy has a couple of Gams, and they're a little bit too high above the threshold, and I don't have a strategy that can deal with it at that time. So if that's the case, Blue Rage, just going invade 2, invade 2, invade 2, that can be a threat. Apart from that, I think that it has favorable matchups, or at least even matchups, into everything except Space Godzilla. Yeah, so it's like Blue Rage and Space Godzilla are bad to, slightly unfavorable matchups. The more combo-y, synergy-based your deck is, the more likely that Gravity Beam prevents you from being able to play the game, right? If you need to get specific pieces in hand, and that's another thing with the Shin Godzilla deck, is they need specific pieces in hand. They need a Godzilla attacks and an extra strategy card and an invade 2 and the rank 2 Shin second form. And so that's 4 cards. And then you're ripping them to 3 cards on your turn, so they have to decide what to discard, and then they have to magically draw the correct 4th piece if they ever want to execute the combo. And there's a very narrow window which they even get an opportunity to do that due to how the movement knockback mechanic works in combination with countering and all the other movement control in the deck. It's just really bad for them. Space Godzilla is kind of threatening because it has the ability to do countering without requiring the use of battle cards, or not traditional battle cards anyway, because they can just play without having to interact with the concept of paying for battle cards, I guess would be a more accurate statement, because they can play their 23 drop Ghidorah. That is a problem theoretically, because that's just a free 10k forever. If I never move out of zone alignment with it, that's just a Gam. At that point, it's a free Gam at that is also immune to basically everything because its rank is 23. Then on top of that, they can also use God of Destruction's counterattack, which is 20,000 counter power in a burst. That can be sequenced in ways that result in having to go to the rank 3 and the rank 4 before we're really ready, before we're able to try to pivot into that invasion backup plan. And moreover, just the fact that Space Godzilla largely doesn't care about being locked to only battle cards of 5 and below means that a significant part of the control deck's advantage is largely moot, right? So, but those I think are probably some of the best matchups and worst matchups to answer your question.
Well, Ian, this was a pleasure as always.
Thanks again for the opportunity to be here. I hope to be able to come back at some point with another different deck.
Yeah, man, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you once again.